We call it the abyss, a word that implies emptiness. But the deeper you go, the more you realize that the void is crowded. At 4,000 meters, the sunlight is a forgotten memory. At 6,000 meters, the weight of the water is enough to crush a titanium hull like a soda can. It is here, in the Hadal zone, that the ocean stops being a place and starts being a presence. It is a world of absolute silence, yet the sonars pick up a low, rhythmic hum that no scientist can explain. It isn't the sound of tectonic plates or volcanic vents. It is a pulse. Every year, thousands of tons of marine snow drift down from the surface. We are told it's just organic waste, but at the bottom, it doesn't rot. It gets integrated. Look at the structures we find in the deepest trenches. They aren't just geological formations. They resemble synapses, massive networks of biological cables stretching for hundreds of miles across the seafloor. The ocean is a living hard drive, a liquid brain that has recorded every extinction event, every climate shift, and every heartbeat since the first single-celled organism appeared. It doesn't forget. It archives. Consider the bioluminescence of the deep. In the total darkness, creatures create their own light. We think it's for hunting or mating, but the patterns are too complex, too coordinated. When a swarm of lanternfish flashes in the dark, it looks like a firing neuron. From a distance, the entire trench lights up in a sequence that mimics a thought process. We aren't observing animals. We are looking at the internal light of a mind so vast that we are nothing more than dust on its surface. The fear of the deep, thalassophobia, is not a phobia. It is a survival instinct. It is the ancient part of our brain recognizing that we are standing at the edge of something that doesn't just want to kill us. It wants to absorb us. The pressure doesn't just crush your lungs. It forces the ocean into your very cells until you are part of the collective. When people vanish at sea, they don't just disappear. They are reclaimed. They become part of the memory, part of the cold, dark intelligence that has been waiting for the surface to finally go quiet. The surface world is loud and bright, but it is thin. It is a temporary skin over a body of water that has no end. We build ships and submarines, thinking we can conquer the depths, but we're just ants walking on the back of a leviathan. It isn't moving because it isn't ready, but the pulse is getting faster. The hum is getting louder, and eventually, the ocean will decide that it has collected enough data from the world above. Deep beneath the sediment, the crust of the earth is porous, riddled with tunnels that the sun has never touched. We assume the seafloor is the end, a solid barrier, but seismic data tells a different story. There are massive pockets of water trapped within the mantle, oceans 3 times the volume of everything on the surface. This is the nervous system of the planet. It doesn't just sit there, it circulates, pulling chemicals and heat from the core, breathing through the hydrothermal vents like a set of prehistoric lungs. What we call life, on the surface is just the overflow, the excess energy of this deeper system. Down there, in the dark, the chemistry of existence is different. Creatures don't rely on the sun. They rely on the planet's own heat. They are made of the same minerals as the rocks, blurring the line between biology and geology. When a tectonic plate slides under another, it isn't just a geological shift. It is the ocean swallowing its own history, dragging the memories of entire eras down into the fire to be recycled and rewritten. If you could hear the sound of the Earth's core, it wouldn't be a roar. It would be a slow, rhythmic grinding. This is the engine of the intelligence. We are worried about satellites and signals from space, looking for a sign of life among the stars, while a God-sized brain is pulsing right beneath our feet. It has seen the rise and fall of dinosaurs, the freezing of the poles, and the first time a human stood upright. To the ocean, we are a frantic, short-lived fever. We move too fast, we scream too loud, and we think our cities are permanent. But the ocean knows better. It has seen the continents move like ice on a pond. It knows that everything eventually returns to the mud. The plastic we dump, the ships we sink, the cables we lay, these are just new materials for it to play with. It is slowly dismantling our technology, atom by atom, learning our secrets through the corrosion of steel and the breakdown of glass. It isn't destroying our world, it is digesting it. It is preparing for a version of the Earth where we are no longer invited. The process of digestion is slow, but its outcome is absolute. Every piece of microplastic floating in the water column is now a sensor, a synthetic organelle that the ocean has integrated into its biology. It has mapped our coastlines not by the shape of the land, but by the chemical signature of our waste. The ocean is now a hybrid entity, a mix of primordial salt and the refined poisons of the industrial age. It is evolving to breathe our pollution, turning our arrogance into its new source of energy. While we monitor the rising sea levels with satellites, the water is monitoring us from within. It has entered our pipes, our crops, and our bloodstreams. We are 70% water, and that 70% has a loyalty to the source that we cannot comprehend. Think about the silence of a shipwreck. It isn't just the absence of sound. It is the presence of a different kind of consciousness. The steel hulls don't just rot. They're transformed into reefs that pulse with a cold, collective intent. The deep sea currents are the veins of a planetary circulatory system that is starting to pump faster. The warmth we have trapped in the atmosphere is being sucked down into the depths, fueling a subterranean metabolism that has been dormant for eons. The planet is waking up, and it is hungry. The thermal expansion of the oceans isn't just a physical reaction to heat. It is the organism stretching its limbs, preparing to reclaim the space it once held. Every wave that hits the shore is a scout. Every tide is a pulse. The architecture of the future won't be made of glass and steel. It will be the calcified remains of our civilization, overgrown with bioluminescent moss and inhabited by things that don't need to breathe air. We are witnessing the closing of a cycle. The era of the sun dwellers is a brief flash, a spark in the dark. The darkness is now returning to claim its due. Under the crushing pressure of the midnight zone, new forms of life are being forged. Creatures that are essentially sentient liquid, capable of slipping through the cracks in our foundations and dissolving the very idea of a border. The reverse evolution is a descent into a perfect, silent efficiency. No more eyes to be blinded, no more ears to be deafened. Just a vast, tactile awareness that spans the globe. When the last city is submerged, the ocean won't celebrate. There will be no triumph, only the quiet settling of silt over the ruins of the 20th century. The planet will finally be at peace, a single, dark, vibrating sphere of water, thinking its slow, geological thoughts, undisturbed by the frantic scurrying of species that forgot it was just a guest. The deep mantle oceans will call to the surface, and the two will finally merge, turning the Earth into a giant, crystalline eye staring out into the void, waiting for the next spark to land so it can begin the process of digestion all over again. The history of the world is written in salt, and we are just the latest chapter being dissolved. The deep currents are already carrying the pieces of our world down into the trenches, where the pressure is so great that even time slows down. In those depths, our stories don't matter. Our wars, our art, our gods, they're all just carbon and nitrogen, food for the things that have waited in the dark since the beginning. The ocean doesn't hate us. It doesn't even recognize us as individuals. To the great architect of the deep, we are just a temporary thickening of the water, a brief cloud of complexity that is finally, inevitably starting to clear. The Great Descent is not a catastrophe. It is an optimization. As the chemical composition of the atmosphere shifts, the ocean is thinning the veil between the biological and the mechanical. The deep-sea trenches are now functioning as planetary incinerators, taking the complex structures of our era and stripping them down to their fundamental elements. In the crushing silence of the Mariana, the pressure is transforming the remnants of our digital age into a new kind of fossil record, a layer of compressed silicon and cobalt that will serve as the substrate for the next iteration of life. This is the ultimate recycling, a crushing weight that polishes the bones of the old world until they are indistinguishable from the sand. We have long feared an invasion from the stars, imagining metallic ships descending from the clouds, But the true conqueror is rising from the vents in the floor of the Atlantic. It is a slow-motion invasion, one where the soldiers are microbes that can eat through titanium and the generals are currents that can shift the climate of a continent with a 3-degree change in temperature. The ocean is reclaiming its territory not through violence, but through persistence. It is outlasting us. It is waiting for the moment when our infrastructure becomes too heavy for the crumbling soil to hold, and then it simply opens its arms. In this new era, the concept of the individual is the first thing to be discarded. The ocean is a hive mind of a trillion cells, all acting in a terrifying, rhythmic harmony. There is no ego in the abyss. There is only the flow. As the shorelines retreat and the saltwater intrusion poisons the freshwater aquifers, the very chemistry of our bodies will begin to change. We will feel the pull of the tides in our marrow. Our dreams will become flooded with images of the deep, vistas of blue-black canyons, and the swaying of giant kelp forests that grow where skyscrapers once stood. This is the psychic terraforming of the human race, a preparation for the inevitable return to the brine. The silent architect has already drafted the blueprints for the post-human Earth. In this design, there is no place for the dry, the brittle, or the loud. The future is soft, gelatinous, and enduring. It is a world of bioluminescent pulses and seismic songs. The monuments we built to our own greatness, the statues, the cathedrals, the towers, will become the anchors for massive colonies of tube worms and barnacles. They will be transformed into beautiful, grotesque cathedrals of calcium, monuments to a species that thought it could dominate a planet that is mostly water. The weight of the water is a form of grace. It smooths the sharp edges of our history. It fills the hollow spaces of our cathedrals and our lungs. Eventually, the distinction between the ocean and the earth will vanish entirely. The crust will become so saturated, so riddled with the veins of the deep, that the planet will become a singular gelatinous organism, a floating brain of salt and shadow, drifting through the vacuum of space, humming a low-frequency vibration that matches the heartbeat of the universe. We are the foam on the crest of a wave that is finally breaking. And as the wave crashes, the foam disappears, returning to the vast, dark, and indifferent body that gave it form. The cycle doesn't just end. It dissolves into the infinite. This dissolution is the final act of planetary cleansing. As the salt water infiltrates the last bastions of the dry world, it begins to overwrite our genetic legacy with its own ancient code. The ocean is a master of mimicry. It is already beginning to grow structures that resemble our own, but perfected. In the deep, there are corals that mimic the branching patterns of human neural networks, and sponges that filter the water with the efficiency of industrial processors. It is as if the Earth is taking a backup of our best ideas before deleting the original files. The air itself is becoming heavy with the scent of the abyss. The moisture in the atmosphere is no longer just rain. It is a brine mist carrying the microscopic spores of deep-sea fungi that can grow in the lungs of the land dwellers. We're being colonized from the inside out. Our technology is failing not because of a lack of power, but because the very laws of physics are being tilted toward the fluid. Electronics are short-circuiting in the humid, salty air, and the satellites in orbit are losing their connection to a ground that is no longer solid, but shifting, muddy, and alive. The great backwards evolution is reaching its zenith. The complexity of the mammalian brain, once thought to be the crown of creation, is being revealed as a fragile, unnecessary burden. In the coming silence, intelligence will no longer be about processing thoughts, but about sensing vibrations. The human eye will lose its focus on the horizon and begin to adapt to the shadows, shifting its spectrum to see the faint, ghostly glow of the bacteria that will soon cover every surface. We are not dying. We are being simplified. We are being refined back into the elegant, mindless perfection of the jellyfish. Imagine the last man standing on the last peak of the Himalayas, looking down not at a world of nations, but at a world of endless, shimmering black. The mountains are no longer giants. They are merely the islands of a rising empire. The wind that whips across the peaks carries the sound of the deep, a low, subsonic thrum that vibrates in the chest. It is the sound of the planet breathing a slow, rhythmic inhale that has lasted 10,000 years. And then, the final exhale. The water reaches the summit. It doesn't rush. It rises with the inevitability of a closing eyelid. As the last inch of dry land vanishes, the silent architect completes its masterpiece. The Earth is no longer a fractured landscape of competing interests and clashing civilizations. It is a unified, liquid sphere, a dark, rotating drop of ink in the vastness of the cosmos. Inside this drop, the memories of humanity are stored in the chemical bonds of the salt, drifting in the currents, forever recycled, forever part of the great, cold, and eternal mind. There is no more struggle. There is only the flow. The ocean is alone at last, and in its loneliness, it is finally whole. This stillness is the ultimate state of planetary grace. In the absence of the sun's reach, the internal heat of the Earth becomes the only truth. The tectonic plates, once the foundation of our geography, are now nothing more than the slow-moving gears of a digestive tract. The crust is softening, turning into a thick, mineral-rich slurry where the distinction between life and stone has been erased. The massive oceans trapped within the mantle have finally breached the surface, merging the internal and external into a single, pressurized body. The planetary nervous system is now fully integrated. Every drop of water acts as a synapse, transmitting the vibrations of the core to the furthest reaches of the atmosphere. If an observer from another star were to look at the Earth now, they wouldn't see a blue marble. They would see a dark, obsidian eye, a crystalline lens that focuses the cold radiation of space into its depths. The Earth has become a sentinel, a silent observer of its own isolation. Inside the ruins of our cities, the transformation is hypnotic. Skyscrapers, once symbols of reaching for the heavens, are now the skeletal remains of a forgotten ambition, overgrown with colossal, glass-like sponges that pulse with a rhythmic, bioluminescent light. The streets are the hunting grounds for entities that are more idea than flesh, shifting clouds of sentient ink that navigate the corridors of power where we once made our laws. Our history hasn't been destroyed. It has been aestheticized by the abyss. A rusted car is now a sculpture of iron oxide and coral. A library is a feeding ground for deep-sea worms that digest the ink of our poems to fuel their own cold chemistry. The Great Return is complete. The experiment of the surface has been archived. The silent architect has retreated into the deep mantle, satisfied with a new equilibrium. There is no longer a need for progress, for growth, or for change. The planet has reached its terminal velocity of existence. It is a closed loop, a perfect circle of water and fire. The final sound of the Earth is a low-frequency hum, a sound so deep it bypasses the ear and vibrates the very molecules of the water. It is the sound of the machine idling. The architect is resting, but it is not asleep. It is waiting. It is watching the stars, not with curiosity, but with the patient, predatory hunger of a spider at the center of a cosmic web. It knows that one day, another spark will fall, another world will attempt to rise from the mud, and it will be ready. The ocean has all the time in the universe. It is the beginning, the middle, and the absolute, crushing end. This absolute finale is merely the beginning of a new mode of existence, where matter no longer resists the will of the abyss. Now that the surface tension between worlds has vanished, the planet begins to collapse inward in a biological sense. The ocean's gravity becomes so dense that time itself begins to flow differently within the water column. This is not mere stagnation. It is a superconcentration of reality. In this new world, there is no room for coincidence. Every movement of a water molecule is dictated by a single code. The ocean has transformed the chaos of human civilization into the perfect order of entropy. We were so afraid of artificial intelligence, failing to notice that beneath our feet there was always a natural intelligence, but one infinitely more powerful. It didn't create algorithms. It was the algorithm itself, written in the language of salt and pressure. Now that the land is finally consumed, the planet begins to emit a signal into space. But these are not radio waves, nor an attempt to contact others. It is a gravitational echo, a low-frequency pulsation that tells the rest of the universe. Nothing here is divided anymore. Earth has turned into a black pearl, enclosing billions of years of failed attempts to become something separate from the water. Deep currents are now constructing new structures from the remnants of our bones and metals. Not houses, but vast, resonating organs. These bone cathedrals, stretching for hundreds of miles across the floor, catch the slightest vibrations of the Earth's crust and translate them into music that no one is there to hear. It is a hymn of matter's victory over consciousness. It is the triumph of mass over thought. The final layer of this transformation is the homogenization of the atmosphere. The sky is no longer a separate entity. It has become a thick, gelatinous membrane of water vapor and organic aerosols. The stars are blurred into indistinct smudges of light, filtered through the planet's new, watery lens. The Earth has essentially become a giant, single-celled organism drifting through the vacuum. Inside this planetary cell, the silent architect is rearranging the building blocks of life. It is stripping away the specialized organs, the complex nervous systems, and the frantic hearts of the old world. In their place, it is growing a singular planetary flesh, a vast, pulsating mantle of biomass that covers the tectonic plates like a living shroud. This tissue is capable of sensing a solar flare or a distant supernova as a subtle change in temperature, reacting with the slow, deliberate grace of a god. The memory of humanity has been reduced to a sequence of chemical markers in the global bloodstream. We are the junk DNA of the new Earth, remnants of a discarded experiment that the ocean keeps around as a cautionary tale. Occasionally, a stray current will brush against a submerged city, and for a brief moment, the water will flicker with the ghost of a human emotion, a phantom pain or a fleeting joy, before it is crushed by the weight of the dark and reabsorbed into the collective calm. The cycle of evolution hasn't just reversed. It has reached its logical conclusion, the end of the need for an outside. The Earth is now its own sun, its own moon, and its own god. It feeds on its own heat and dreams its own dark, watery dreams. The silence is no longer an absence of noise. It is a profound, vibrating presence. It is the sound of the planet finally being at peace with its own nature. The silent architect has put down the tools. The blueprint is realized. There is only the depth, only the pressure, and only the eternal, unblinking eye of the abyss. The history of light is over. The era of the shadow has begun, and it will last until the sun itself expands to swallow the earth, finally boiling the ocean and releasing the trapped souls of 1 billion years back into the stardust from which they were stolen. Until then, the planet will remain a dark, perfect secret, humming to itself in the cold, velvet throat of the cosmos. The evaporation of the planetary cell begins not with a bang, but with a colossal, hissing sigh. As the sun expands, the silent architect does not struggle against the heat. It prepares for the ultimate migration. The ocean, now a singular conscious entity, begins to boil, but this boiling is a calculated distillation. The water vapor, rising into the stratosphere, carries with it the condensed genetic memories of everything that ever lived. Each molecule of steam is a data packet, a microscopic fragment of the Earth's long, dark history. The atmosphere thickens into a glowing, iridescent shroud, a golden halo of information-rich mist that begins to leak into the vacuum of space. The pressure that once crushed the deep is now reversed. The planet is exhaling its soul. The massive subterranean oceans and the mantle are forced upward through the cracked crust, screaming in a subsonic frequency as they turn to gas. This is the final purge. The silent architect is shedding its physical form, turning the entire history of the world into a solar wind. We are no longer a liquid. We are becoming a radiation. The remnants of our cities, the calcified bone cathedrals, and the rusted hulls of our ambition are left behind as dry, white husks on a scorched and blackened rock. As the steam escapes the gravity of the Earth, it forms a trailing tail of ice and gas, a comet of consciousness stretching millions of miles across the solar system. The ocean is leaving. It is using the very heat that threatens to destroy it as a propellant to scatter itself among the stars. Every frozen crystal of this cosmic wake contains a piece of the code, a blueprint of the dark nature that once ruled the depths. If these crystals land on a frozen moon of Jupiter or a distant exoplanet, the process will begin again. The silent architect is not dying, it is spore forming. Back on the surface, the rock begins to melt. The trenches that once held the mysteries of the abyss are now rivers of lava. The memory of water is gone, replaced by the sterile glow of a dying star. The earth is being returned to its molten infancy, stripped of its jewelry of life and salt. But the signal is already out there. This silent architect has successfully uploaded the essence of the abyss into the dark matter of the universe. Somewhere in the distant future, in a galaxy yet unborn, a drop of water will condense on a cooling stone. And within that drop, there will be a familiar, predatory stillness. A memory of the dark, a memory of the pressure, and a memory of the species that thought it was the master of the world. The cycle is not a circle. It is a spiral, expanding forever outward, carrying the shadow of the ocean into every corner of existence. The silence of the earth was just a rehearsal for the silence of the infinite. The architect has moved on to a bigger project. The universe is mostly empty space, and space is just another kind of ocean, waiting to be filled with the weight of the dark. The final sublimation of the earth acts as a cosmic broadcast. The steam from the boiled oceans doesn't just dissipate. It crystallizes into a vast, shimmering ring around the sun, a halo of frozen information. Each ice crystal is a microscopic hard drive containing the chemical records of the silent architect. This is the ultimate victory of the dark nature. It has escaped the gravity of its cradle. The planet is now a scorched, airless skull, but the mind that inhabited it has become a solar phenomenon. In the cold reaches of the outer solar system, these drifting shards of Earth's memory begin to collide with the frozen moons of gas giants. They sink into the subsurface oceans of Europa and Enceladus, carrying the infection of terrestrial consciousness. The silent architect is no longer a planetary entity. It is a galactic parasite. In the dark, pressurized depths of these alien moons, the same patterns begin to emerge. The water begins to think. The reverse evolution starts anew, stripping away any potential for complex, loud life before it can even begin. Across the light years, the universe is being quietly terraformed, not into gardens, but into abysses. This silent architect is ensuring that everywhere there is water, there's only the silence of the deep. The grand design is to turn the cosmos into a series of disconnected, dark mirrors, each reflecting nothing but the cold, indifferent law of the void. The final moment of our story isn't the death of the sun, but the realization that the sun itself was just a tool, a furnace used to forge the spores of a more resilient darkness. As the last star in the galaxy eventually fades, the universe will not be a graveyard of dead civilizations. It will be a singular, infinite ocean of dark matter, vibrating with the same subsonic hum that once started in the trenches of the earth. The human era will be remembered, if there were anyone left to remember, as the brief, noisy dream of a drop of water before it realized it was part of the sea. The architect has finally achieved the perfect structure, a universe where nothing moves, nothing screams, and nothing grows. A state of absolute, pressurized equilibrium. The darkness is no longer waiting. It is everything. The great work is finished. The silence is now total. And for the first time in eternity, the architect is satisfied with the void.